Welcome to the show All Things Writing. I am your host, Brian the Writer. Let me take you on a journey through my writing life and introduce you to some of the amazing talent that exists in the writing world. Whether you are looking for a little advice or just to catch an interesting interview, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All Things Writing starts now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to All Things Writing. I'm your host, Brian the Writer. Today, now I know I'm a little lax in making videos. There's a good reason for that, actually. The reason I don't make videos on like a continual programmed basis is for two reasons. One, if I don't have anything that I want to talk about that is going to be substantive for you all, I'm not going to do it. There are plenty of other people out there that put out videos on a continual basis, and some of it's garbage because they don't provide anything that's substantial and helpful for their chosen demographic and the people they want to talk with, my fans. However, today I decided to do a little video because of it's weird. It's like you'll be bopping along and all of a sudden somebody will say, hey, what about X, this thing that happens in the writing world? What do you think about that? And they may not even be talking to me, and it may spur a thought or an idea. I actually very recently had a question pop up on this idea of character development. How do we develop characters? And I've talked about it in the past, about how I develop characters, but I wanted to get a little bit more in depth on it. By the way, I'm going to do a similar video on my Patreon channel, probably getting a little bit more in depth than I am going to here, basically due to some time constraints. I just don't have a ton of time right now. But I want to talk about it a little bit because I think it's important. So recently I was speaking with a young author, a person who, he has an idea. He actually has quite a bit of life experience, having spent time as an interpreter in Afghanistan and, had family in Afghanistan, saw what happened in that country prior to the Soviets being there, and then everything that took place afterwards. And it's pretty impressive, his life experience. And life experience is oftentimes forged in tragedy. And I think because of that, that is a great catalyst for character development. Now, certainly I cannot sit there and tell you about a character from Afghanistan. I've never been to Afghanistan. I was supposed to go, interesting enough, when I was in uniform. They canceled it because I had literally just come off of active duty orders, and there was a rule at the time that said they couldn't send you again within so many months, so they canceled my orders, which is fine. Whatever. I did my duty, did what I was asked. Did it with honor. Life in the U.S. military was good to me overall. Left me with some tinnitus and bad knees, but it's just the way these things work. So, what do you think of when I say character development? Now, there are a lot of people who will sit down at a table and drop these elaborate character sheets. And I am actually for that idea, but here's the thing. I don't necessarily do it for all my characters because there are some that I know the person that they're drawn off of so well that I don't really need to do that quite so much. But character sheets are very, very useful when you're trying to remember certain details. Now, I did mention it before in a previous iteration of the show where, I love these D&D character reference sheets that talk about their power, their, what do they need to roll for, whatever they've got going on, what is their family background, religious preferences, sexual preferences, did they grow up in a city, did they grow up on a farm, did they grow up in a cave, all kinds of different things that you can put into these character sheets. But I don't necessarily do character development that way, not in such a structured way. You'll hear a lot of times we talk about pantser versus plotter. I have always made the argument that nobody is purely one or the other. I definitely am more of a pantser, in the sense that I kind of just let things fall out of my brain, and when they fall out of my brain, I sit there and I go, okay, well that's good. Let's go back and look at the character of Haley. Haley, the space assassin, which is what the Bagorian Chronicles was originally called. I had written the episodic series after having read Stephen King's book on writing, because there's a part in there he talks about a space plumber being yanked, a plumber from Earth being yanked into space. How would they react? How would they go about this new reality that they're stuck in? Would they find meaningful work on a spaceship? What is it that they would do? How would they react? It got me to sort of thinking about this idea of what would happen to my daughter if my daughter Jeanette, if she got yanked into space. How would I want her to react to that situation? I don't raise my children to be weaklings, for lack of a better term. I'm a Gen Xer through and through. I grew up 17 years in the Army, staff sergeant. I don't believe in I don't believe in pity. I don't believe in doing things for others when they can be trained to do it for themselves. Yes, I have been accused of being overly harsh, but also all my children grew up, now are successful adults, can take care of themselves, are very good at what they're doing, and have good lives. And that's because I taught them that you can do these things for yourself. I don't need to do everything for you. That doesn't stop her from asking, by the way. I love my daughter to death, but oh boy, she drives me nuts sometimes. I think all children do. When you, when I looked at how I would want my daughter to react to being stuck in outer space, I thought about, I thought about what would be her end state. What does she want? She wants to get home. Who doesn't love home, right? I thought about how she would interact with the aliens. How would she talk to them? Given a set of circumstances, what would she do? Well, my daughter, of course, is, as all children are growing up, really good at manipulation. My daughter is always trying to get me to do the one extra thing for her. Yes, she is. Sometimes she does it. Sometimes I know she's done it, and I just do it anyway. But I think that in that situation she would be strong. She would be a strong, competent woman who would, not let the situation get out of her control, or she would make sure and shape the situation so that it's something that's going to be beneficial for her. Ultimately, Haley's goal in the book, by the way, is to get back home. She wants to get home. I mean, I don't make a big deal out of it. She's not like slobbering, crying, oh, I need to go home. She doesn't do that. She figures out what she needs to do to make things happen so that she can get to where she needs to be. Eventually, she sort of realizes that home is relative and family is relative sometimes. You can have people who you're not related to that you consider family and you would die for. I think that my daughter would feel that way too. Now, my daughter, by the way, eventually surprised me and went into the military, which is, nobody was more shocked than I was. But it was good for her. It was good for her. It spoke to a desire for something that is bigger than her. Now, Haley in the book, in the Bagorian Chronicles, looks at the world and sees there's something bigger than her that she needs to attend to. That's true of all of us. We all should, in my humble opinion, give ourselves to a cause larger than us. Because if we spend our lives only taking care of ourselves, we sort of lose that We lose that look on the world. We lose the idea that we're not just alone in this world. There are things going on that we either support or we work against because it's part of who we are. It's part of our being, right? Now, Haley, of course, does not operate. The character Haley, as she exists in my mind, does not exist purely in a world where she's just my daughter. No, there are other factors that play in. If you look at Haley and her responses to what's going on around her, you will see that her humor tends to be on the wry side. I get that from my mother. She is she can be in the right set of circumstances very gutsy and forward. That comes from a very good friend of mine who she tends to be very much on the side of going forward. She says what, interesting, this came up the other day in another conversation, the ability to say what you are thinking at the moment, not wishy washy, not sugarcoat, but say what is on your mind. And that went into who Haley would become as well. But I didn't want her to be shrinking violent. I didn't want to be her to be stereotypical. There are men that write female characters sometimes go to really weird places. It's like they've never met a woman. I don't know, or had women in their lives that they loved and respected, and I think that could be a problem when you're writing female characters. You take you take the best parts of the people you want to emulate in that character. But here's your problem when you're creating a character. I'm going to paint a picture for you. Let's say you're writing Superman, Christopher Reeve's Superman, the best Superman, by the way. Yeah, fight me. He was the best Superman. The the problem that Superman faced in all of his trials and tribulations was one, kryptonite, two, Lex Luthor. He had to fight the bad guys from his home world that got sent off in the shard. These are all things that he faced. Superman was impervious to most things. Bullets would bounce off him. He could fly around the world in like moments, but he wasn't impervious. You cannot draw characters which are essentially impervious to the world around you, because if you have a character that never has that flaw, that never has that chink in the armor, that never has that thing that makes them vulnerable, you've written something that'll never work in a story. You need to make sure and have that little thing in there. Now, they can be a character flaw. It can be like there's that one Superman, I'm forgetting which one it was, where Superman sort of faces his darker side and has to battle his own darker whim. It's pretty great. There's a pretty great scene where Superman's in the bar. He like melts the mirror. Anyway, I digress. You should you should understand that just like us, our characters, our human character, there are things that bother us. I don't like rats. Rats are my big thing. I don't mind snakes. Rats bother me. Rats will attack you. Rats are mean. I'm talking sewer rats, not the little mice run around. No, I'm talking sewer rats. They're scary. They're terrifying. I don't mind snakes. Snakes normally warn you before they're going to strike. So except for water moccasins, they're just jerks. I I don't like failure. So if you're going to write a book, if I was to write a book on myself based on my character, the one thing that would get me to second guess myself is failure. And I don't mean like, failure like, oh, I forgot to take the garbage out. That kind of failure. No, it's going to be failure like I go to undertake this major, I'm working a major contract, I'm building a big building, I'm trying to reunite people with their families, and I fail. That's one of the things that bothers me. I don't like doing that. I haven't certainly not been successful at everything I've done in my life, but that's one of the things that'll bother me. So how do you build that into your character? There is a habit of new writers to sometimes build in that in a paragraph or a chapter or whatever. Be careful with that. As you're writing a story, as you're putting these words down and you're crafting your narrative, make sure that you are make sure that you're putting that information in dribs and drabs. Short reflections, short conversations with people, maybe some inner dialogue, or not some inner dialogue, but monologue about or narration on things that happened in their lives, which hint to but don't explicitly say. I once interviewed the great Terry Brooks, which was one of my crowning things. I saved the interview on my computer. Who knows? Someday I may rerun it again because it was just such a great interview. I think you have to be careful. Don't assume that your reader is dumb. You need to make sure that when you are writing your characters, you are building in these things along the way. You're talking about maybe they get nervous in the presence of somebody, and then you flash back later on to something that happened to them, and then you talk about how they make you feel uncertain, how the character is feeling uncertain in some way because of the presence of that character or that other person. These things help build those characters out, make them more real. But that's the trick. Reality. Do not draw a stereotypical person. Do not draw out a person who is perfect in every single way, because if you do that, you are never going to create somebody who's believable. And that's the trick, right? You need to make sure that the people who you are creating are believable. Because in that way, you draw characters that people are going to want to read. People don't want to read perfect characters. They want to read flawed human beings. They want to read human beings in some way that are very much a reflection of themselves. There was a really great experiment that was done, and it showed that people like to look at pictures of people that look like themselves. It's probably a deeply ingrained thing from when we were, cave people. I don't know. Looking out in the world, if they looked like you, they were more likely to think like you and act like you and more reliable. Well, that's the thought process anyway that people probably had. Why we're wired that way. It's sort of like a lion would look out onto the veldt, and an animal that did not look like them is either food or a threat, right? We're probably not too far away from the lion mentality. However, in order to make a character believable, they can't look so much like you that you're not going to throw twists and turns into it. So remember that when you're building up these characters. Remember that when you have a character reference sheet that you have built, if you've done one, you throw something in there that is outside of you. Don't just write you on a piece of paper. That's easy to do, and fundamentally it ends up being flawed. Step outside of who you are. Now, that's not to say you should not strive for authenticity. You absolutely should, in every way, shape, or form. Make sure they're accurate reflections of people. I don't normally do this, but I have done it in the past. It's called it's called like a diversity edit or a race edit, or it's when you were writing characters which are outside of your. I was writing about an African American person, and I asked for a person to actually review that character because I wanted to make sure I wasn't being stereotypical. Because what this young lady who did the work for me pointed out, she said, I hate it when I read books that are pandering. Believe me, I understand this completely. Because I think there's a certain stereotype that fits people from the Midwest, and I'm from the Midwest. There's a certain stereotype that fits redheaded, older guys. There are stereotypes to everything out there. So while I don't do it like every time, if I know I'm stepping outside of that comfort zone, I do have somebody review that character for me. And what's really interesting is they may add in facets that you never considered. So it's something that you can use, a tool that is in your toolbox to use. Okay. Also, by the way, this is where a developmental editor can really help out too, is if you've written characters that are two-dimensional, they can sit there and say, okay, well, why are they, why does this look like every person I've ever, thought about in my entire life and has nothing special about them? They can help you add back in some of that spice of the character. So, well, anyway, that's it for all things writing. That's the thing I wanted to sort of talk about today. Like I said, I think I'm going to get a little bit more into character sheets and that kind of thing, probably on the Patreon channel, because I want to maybe walk people through just like a character example. Let's make up a character and go with them, and see where we can take it. But all right, well, thank you very much for tuning in to All Things Writing this week. I really appreciate it. Hope you're having a lovely day. The weather's finally breaking here in Northern Virginia, so it's a little bit warmer than it has been, and I really am thrilled about that because I hate the cold. This is not why I moved to Virginia in the first place. Yeah, it's too cold. Anyway, all right, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. This has been another amazing episode of All Things Writing. If you heard something that got your wheels spinning, check out the links in the show notes. Also, please follow the show and remember to leave those reviews. Those simple acts of kindness mean the world to us. Hop on over to briannowak.com, and that is Brian with a Y, and check out my latest novels. I'm on Amazon or wherever you buy your ebooks. And as a reminder, the music you heard on the show today was used under license from the artist Ryan Ancona. Thanks for listening to the show and have a blessed day.